Okay.
So then moving on to our running. So we've got a bit of a running progression here, and how I think about moving through our running progression. So like you said, from 6 weeks to 6 months, you've already done some of these things. But what I wanted to focus on is how to make them a little bit harder, how to challenge the athletes, and how you can still work on some of the basics, even though you're in a more of an advanced stage of running, because running mechanics, I think, like I said before, I'm working with winter athletes, they're not runners, so we can always be working on those mechanics, but it's how you make those mechanics harder in order to, work on whether it be balance and stability or some other component in this late stage of rehab.
Yeah, that's a good point. And something I'd never really thought about, and hopefully you can give us some insight here, is that, for the winter athletes that can't get out on the ski slopes or out on the, how do they get their, how do you manipulate their fitness? And so obviously running is going to be an important part of that. Are you trying to reproduce their work to rest ratios with sprint work? Or is it, what other cardiovascular bits and pieces might you add in to try and get that same degree of stimulus there to at least prepare them for the demands of, a routine, an aerial routine or a downhill slalom run or whatever it may be? Obviously every athlete's different in their demands, but do you use running as a way to get their fitness levels up, to get them closer to the demands of their sport? Is that what you would do?
Yeah, for some athletes, again, like you just said, it depends on the sport, depends on the athlete, but running is quite good because it requires, it's cyclical, it's single leg at certain points, but it also adds impact into their load, and because of, when they're not on snow, they don't get those, they're almost like vibrations when they're skiing and snowboarding, those small vibrations on the snow, so they do need impact load in order to maintain bone density and bone health. So running is a great way of incorporating that, and we might just do, in general prep, we'll do steady state work, and as they get closer to getting back on snow, we'll start to change the intervals and the work to rest ratio for their particular sport or their training. And so I guess the difference there is sometimes the training doesn't reflect the competition. So we actually need to train for their on-snow training initially, and then as they get closer to competition, we might be changing their work to rest intervals for the competition. Yes. That makes sense?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's interesting with winter sport in that the training doesn't necessarily mean performance or competition. But running is great stimulus for that, from a general conditioning perspective, an impact perspective, and all around conditioning perspective. You don't need any equipment, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah, that's good, because it's an interesting, because a lot of people, you talk to a court-based athlete who's wanting to get back to basketball, netball, European handball, you're talking to a field-based athlete. Running is certainly a key milestone that they want to tick off, and largely, they want to get there about 3-month mark, and most elite athletes can probably, aim for that timeline to return back to running. But certainly, for recreational athletes too, running is often it's a goal. But certainly, when you don't get access to the snow very much and the winter ski fields, to find that fitness outlet's really important. So it's nice to know running is certainly it's a good stimulus for that. So I'll encourage more of my athletes to get off the bike and out of the pool and onto the road.
Definitely.
Cool.
Definitely. So looking at our running examples, for this athlete, they've got running twice a week in their program because their third session is a gymnastics session. So that's where their change of direction and agility is kind of split up. And within that program, we'll incorporate things like running drills, but in order to make them more difficult, we'll add, again, some perturbation or some balance and stability challenges. So here we've got a simple exercise, running mechanics drills, so just walking high knees, but by adding, your water bag and then increasing the stability requirement, it's overhead, you need good core engagement again, but you're still working on those running mechanics that I think are really important. Then the same thing, but increasing the tempo. So high knee running, I think everyone does this drill. It's so common. But adding a water bag, it increases the stability demand. It means you have to have a really upright torso by having it out in front of you. And it just engages the athletes a little bit more because they have to focus on what they're doing.
Yep, for sure. So just to go back a second, that overhead water bag walking, that is, especially at that speed that the athlete's walking through there in the video, even though we're talking about the 6 month mark, like that could even be introduced a lot earlier, you know, like for some athlete to almost like get that 2 for the price of 1 effect with the core engagement, and to get some really good, nice hip positioning, and to get some terminal knee extension. And, you know, like it's a great all-rounder that obviously it's good in this time point, but no doubt we could be bringing it in a little bit earlier if the athlete's showing some good competency, even as early as maybe, you know, week 6 to 12, you know, like if they've got some really good lower leg strength that's returning nicely, you may not put the load over their head, for example, and not have so much perturbation there, but certainly a dowel or a stick over their head or something over their head could be a good challenge in those earlier stages too.
Oh, absolutely. There's I guess, like you just said, it is milestone based. It's not necessarily time based.
Yeah.
So if the athlete's ready for it and they've ticked off all the precursors to it, then yeah, there's no problem with adding that in.
Yep.
And then I guess the last one we have here, so we've got running high knees with the water bag in our arms.
Yep.
Then going overhead is much more challenging, and then doing that dynamically requires a lot of focus, a lot of concentration, a lot of good connections between the upper and lower body. So I like that one to engage athletes to do something like a basic drill, but you know, really need to focus.
Yep. And so these, you know, examples of this drill in particular, or a series of these drills, would you do them over a 10, 20 metre distance, or is it over 5 or 10 metre distance? Can you give us a rough idea as to how this may look in regards to a running program? Do they sit also in front of like going out for a run?
So in this phase, it'll be before their agility. So it's used as a bit of a warm-up before we get into fast, dynamic kind of changes of direction or reaction type movements. Generally for running drills and this kind of program, they'll start with a basic warm-up, so basic jog, some dynamic stretching. Then we go into our running drills such as these. They've got between three to five different running drills targeted at the specific needs for that athlete. So if they need to work on their heel recovery, there might be a drill in there for heel recovery. They might need to increase their torso stability when they run because they've just got so much going on. So we might incorporate some of these water bag drills, and then we'll do between 2 to 3 sets, depending on the week, and they usually 10 to 20 meters.
Yeah, cool.
Not really any shorter than about 10 meters. Really,
Awesome.
So after we've done our straight line, that's our straight line running, and our drills, I guess, to warm up for our speed session, this is where we start to incorporate, like I said, our change direction. And so one of the first exercises we've got here is our slalom cones. So just setting up some cones and getting the athletes to move forwards and side to side around the cones as quickly as they can. So it's planned, it's a change direction. They'll go through and do maybe between 6 to 10 reps, depending on how much other work I want them to do during the session, but somewhere between 6 to 10. So they've got some repetition. And as they get better at it, I'll ask the athletes to move the cones, or I'll go through and I'll move the cones on each rep. So it's not always the same. It's not always predictable, because again, this is the time we're trying to increase the unpredictability. And then from there, this same exercise, we can turn into more of an agility exercise where there is some reaction work and it is more unpredictable by, adding something like a TheraBand or a power band. So here you can see the athlete's just got a band around their hips and it's currently tied to something. But as they move through the course, it's getting, the band's getting more tight and less tight. So they've got to adapt to that, and they've got to get used to a changing stimulus. If you wanted to make it harder, you'd get a coach and get get the coach to pull on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's cool. Yep.
Yeah. So I really like that exercise as an introduction to some kind of an agility based program, and it's mostly just moving in that forward and side to side plane, but then making it a little bit more difficult and a little bit more reactive. You can do something like cone agility or banded cone agility, and here you've got the athlete reacting to what the coach is saying. So they stand behind the line, you say blue, they need to move to the blue cone as quickly as possible and then back to the centre. And the band is just making it a little bit more difficult for them to, judge how far they need to go or how much they need to decelerate, along with then reacting to the external stimulus from the coach.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's taking that extra stimulus to another way with those different coloured cones and those random, some once again, those that have got luxury of a bit of tech, you could use the timing lights and those kind of light systems. But I love the good old fashioned different coloured witches hats. They certainly do a great job as well in this situation.
Yeah, but you've got so much technology you can use now. As long as it's reactive, it definitely works. I mean, one of the ones we came up with one of my ACR athletes was actually adding, instead of just having cones, actually getting pieces of equipment that were different colours.
Yes.
And so instead of just being colours, it was also the type of equipment. So I might say dumbbell or blue, because the dumbbell was blue. So they had various forms of stimulus to have to think about, and it just increases that neurological demand, which then takes the focus off the leg because they have to think about what's going on.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's really good.